Check, mic check. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Back in this thing. Um, Doing a lot of learning, you know. I tried streaming the other day, and messed it all up, and so had to come back again today. And it's gonna be a learning process, so I love it. Um, well, let's jump back into it. Last time that we were here, we were talking about finding, you know, idols and men to look up to. And so, I try to make this like a step by step process using the things that I've learned in my life. And I'm going to try to give you the lessons that I've learned so that way you don't have to go through them, or you can use this information to find out what you need to seek for in growing up in a single mother home, in a single parent home. And so, I left off with talking about finding idols and finding men that you can look up to that you want to look like when you become a man. And so, what I'll do is I'll start with my relationship with my uncle. I kind of left off with that, and basically, my uncle was the first man that I kind of like looked up to, that I saw the most in my youth, where I was like, wow, I want to be like him. That is what I want to look like when I become a man or when I get older. And so I really just kind of wanted to be just like him, like he was the first person that I said, okay, here's what I want to look like. And I just loved the way that he always had nice clothes. He always, was like the life of the party. Everybody loved being around him. And, besides little like family things, mostly everybody had like good things to say about him. And so my relationship with him was like in my youth, you know, I really just wanted to kind of follow him around and be around him as much as possible. And as I started to get older, he got older as well. So his life kind of progressed. And the times when I would see him, he'd pick me up. We go have fun. We pick me up in his nice car, got some rims on it. He's got the speakers in the back. He's looking fresh. He's smelling good. And, we would just go somewhere. Like he'd take me to the mall and like buy me some clothes or buy me some shoes. And, I would see how good he was with women, and, how cool and flirtatious he was. And I was in awe of him. He quickly became my most favorite person in the world. I really idolized him. And so, seeing that person that's there, that I can say, okay, this is what I want to look like. Now I'm drawing from him. And so, when school would come around, I used to, just wear whatever my mom put out. And, as I got older and I saw my uncle and how he did things and how he dressed, then I became more interested in how I looked when I went to school. And, what was I wearing? Was it going to match? Was it going to look good? And so he implemented these things in me without even trying, because of me just following in his footsteps of saying, okay, this is how he looks, well, I want to look cool too. And so I implemented his style into mine. And as time progressed, I made it my own, but like I wanted to dress and look just like him. And he was just the coolest person in the world to me. And so I tried to follow his blueprint. And from there, I kind of got my first real lesson as well, in what it means to grow up and not have a father and just have your mother. And so I started learning, different things about attachment. And so when you're looking for these surrogate fathers, you're gonna find out that like attachment, you try to use these people to kind of become the father for you, and you become attached to them. And so one thing you want to learn is to not become too attached to these idols that you create for yourself to live up to and to become, because then you can be let down and your heart can be broken, and you can, that can probably, take your path on a different route. And so, what happened for me is, I remember like it was yesterday. We were, on a ride home, and my uncle was, supposed to come get me, and my mom was on the phone with him while we were driving home, and I was in the back seat, and I could tell that my mom and him were like having a good conversation, and basically she got really mad, and then she ended up hanging up the phone, and she, ended up telling me, hey, I know your uncle said that he was going to come get you, but he says that he's too busy. And, I don't want to fault her in any way, because she was still young and she was probably hurt of the sadness that she felt by telling me. I mean, there have been times before when, she had to tell me, but this was a particular time that she could tell that I was really looking forward to it, and it really hurt me a lot. And that was the first time I experienced like a real heartache, where like I felt pain. And those are the times that you can kind of be pushed one way or another. Luckily enough, me and him had created a bond that, really couldn't be broken. And so, yes, I was hurt, but I was able to learn something out of that situation, which kind of leads me into, some other men that were in my life, which, he had his own life going on. And so he kind of would be in and out as I got older. He wasn't around as much. And, he was a father as well, and a young father, kind of family dynamic. But so then my mom, later ended up meeting my brother's father. And she ended up marrying him. And they weren't married very long, but they had my brother and they got married. And so he became my first actual like father figure. My uncle was like an idol for me, but this guy became a father figure. And for the longest time, I thought that he was my biological father, kind of like my mother with my grandfather. And so, I really, it's funny because it plays into when I was talking about being different looking. And, I didn't know that I was different until I started going to school. And then I realized, oh, I am different, because I thought that, I was just like every other black kid. So I thought that he was my real father. And I learned that he wasn't my real father. But my relationship with him was very kind of cool, because I thought that he was my father. And so I looked up to him, and I listened to him. And he didn't stay around very long. And he left us in a time where, life wasn't really good for us at that time. And he really actually just kind of like disappeared. And so that goes in, I'm telling that story to say that, you're going to have these attachments with these different men in your life, but you don't want to become so reliant on them where it can break you. And so, I was able to learn that at a young age, and not a lot of people get a chance to learn it at a young age where they can overcome it. And so you're going to have these times where they're going to let you down, and you need to have your heart prepared for that. And so you have to remind yourself, now I'm taking from these men what I need, because they're filling a void for me, but I'm not going to become over attached to them, because they're not my actual father. And the kind of connection that you would have with an actual father would probably be, and more than likely be, a lot different. And so, my mother ended up, having different men in and out, and she never really had a real stable relationship after my brother's father for a while. And, kind of like any young kid, I was very protective of my mother. So I never really got any attachments to the men that she dated. And really, I didn't like any of them, like any young kid. And so, I kind of never really gained any attachment to any of them. And then none of them really stayed around long anyway. But as I got a little older, my mom started dating a guy who was younger than her. And this relationship was actually a long lasting one. It wasn't super long, but it was longer lasting than previous ones, to the point where they had thought that they were going to be married. And, my mom and him were living together, and he lived with us, and he became a father figure for me. And, for the beginning part of our relationship, I tried to not get too attached to him because I had got used to men kind of coming and going. And because he was around so much, and him and my mom lived together and they were supposed to get married, and I had met his family, and, those dynamics, I let my guard down as time progressed. And him and my mom didn't end up working out. And they ended up, calling off the marriage. And he ended up moving out. And before, him moving out, I remember I was in the garage and I was like working on my handle. Like, I thought I was going to be a basketball star. And so I was working on my handles in the garage, and I remember he came in and he sat me down and he basically told me, me and your mom are not going to be together, but that doesn't mean that our relationship will be over. And, that's probably the right thing that you should say being in his shoes in that situation, which is, you tell the kid, hey, this doesn't end the relationship that we've built. But in reality, me and him never really had a relationship much after that day. And, maybe my mom played a part, maybe not, but in his position, it makes sense. You're a young man and you're helping this lady raise other children. And, I think he did the best that he could. But from my standpoint, and this is a learning standpoint for you, is, I let my guard down and I got attached to him. And I'm not telling you to not let your guard down at any point, because it is good to, fully give your heart. But him leaving, that reminded me of the pain that I had when, my brother's father left us. And then it reminded me of the pain of when my uncle told me he couldn't pick me up. And so, it kind of reminded me again, and it brought me back to this state of understanding that, because these men are not my biological father and I don't have my biological father, men are going to come and go out of my life. And so I just kind of want to reiterate that for you as you're looking for surrogate fathers, because this is the first step into, your journey of your manhood, is finding these surrogate fathers. And in the midst of finding these surrogate fathers and these idols that you can look up to, you have to be able to protect your heart as well, so that way you don't become crushed. And so, I basically ended up like honing in on idols, because these people that come into your life who are going to date your mom and things like that, or uncles, these are people that are there. You can touch them, you can hang out with them, you can spend time with them. But in the midst of that, you should also have men that are further away from you that you can't touch, that you can look up to and take an interest in and draw skills from them. And so the people that I drew skills from was from the people that I idolized for sports. And so the first person that I really idolized was Kevin Garnett. And he was like one of my favorite players because I loved how he played with passion. He always put his heart on the line. And so that was something that I wanted to learn, which was this, I wanted to draw that skill and put that into me, which is, have this passion for something and be able to put your all into it. And so that's what I drew from Kevin Garnett. Excuse me. And so, he quickly became like my favorite player. And another player that I really idolized, who was, kind of like my 1A to Kevin Garnett, was Allen Iverson. And the reason why I liked Allen Iverson, because he kind of had like this bad boy persona, which was, he had tattoos and, he wore jewelry and he looked like hip hop, but he also had like this, like fuck it mentality. Like I'm going to go out and do my job and I don't care what anybody says or thinks about me, even though AI does have a big heart. But that's one thing that I drew from him, is this kind of persona of I don't care what anybody says, I'm going to go out and do my job and be the best at it. And the reason why I say that is because growing up in a single parent household, your mother's love becomes your end all be all. And so you're always looking to please her. You always want to please her to receive her love. And you have to learn how to say, I don't care what anybody thinks, and I'm going to do what I think is best. And so, having the passion that I learned from Kevin Garnett, and, I can take that into my life. And then I'm learning from Allen Iverson to say, hey, fuck it. Then another athlete that I had, like grew a liking for was Derek Jeter. And the reason why I liked him was, one, because like everybody loved him and he was really great at his job. But I really took a liking to him because he was the first athlete that I saw that was like me, where it was like, he had a kind of ambiguous background. I wasn't sure, what he was or who he was. And so he was the first guy that I looked at, was like, hey, there's somebody that looks like me who's doing something great. And I want to be somebody that's great as well. And seeing him do it let me know, hey, I can do it too. And that was one of the great things about Derek Jeter that I took from him, was that, even though I don't look like everybody that's around me, I can still become successful as well. And then another athlete that I looked up to, which, these guys don't have to always be athletes. I just was somebody who was, interested in sports, and sports was something that kind of drawed me in. And, so that's kind of where my life took me. Yours doesn't have to be athletes. It can be anybody in any field that you look up to that does something great that you can draw these skills from. And so the other athlete was Ken Griffey Jr. And the reason why I liked him was because, once again, he was awesome and he had the smoothest, dopest swing. And, he was really great at his job. But I love the fact that he played a sport that his dad played, and they both were able to play together. And I always loved that story when I read about him, was that he was able to play with his dad, and his dad was a, really good player. And so that kind of showed me that somebody that I kind of wanted to be, more so like his father, but also Ken Griffey. Like, I wanted to say to myself, okay, I want to establish something where if I was to have a kid, my kid would want to be great at it as well. And so that was something that I drawed from that, which was, being able to look up to somebody and say, hey, I want to be great like them, like Ken Griffey probably said about his father. And so I drew that from them, which was, establish something great so the people that come after you have somebody to look up to. And the next player that I looked up to was Deion Sanders. And the reason why I looked up to Deion Sanders was because he just had this confidence about himself that was like really unmatched. And, besides him being super cool, he just had a lot of self-belief. And the way that I grew up, and the way that you probably grow up too, is sometimes you're a little shy growing up in a single parent household, and you're afraid to be, egotistical and self-confident, mainly because you draw your confidence from pleasing your mother. And so, having these athletes to look up to, like Deion Sanders, let me know that it's okay to be confident in myself and belief in myself, and believe that I can accomplish things. And even though I don't have somebody around that's pushing me, because my mother pushed me, but in a different way. My mother kind of gave me a love where it was like, you can do anything you want to do, and, whatever you put your mind to, you could do. but sometimes you need people around you that can actually push you in what it is that you do. And that's where a father comes in. And because, we don't have that, we have to draw these skill sets from other men. And so I drew the confidence from Deion Sanders, which, I'm able to play in between. I know when I can be confident and when I can be my natural shy self. And so I drew that from him. And then some other players, which was Michael Jordan, which, everybody kind of looked up to Michael Jordan. The reason why I love Michael Jordan was mainly because of Space Jam. Like, that's kind of my introduction into Michael Jordan. I was a little young to watch his games, but my introduction to MJ was Space Jam. And after that, I was just like, I was in love with him. Space Jam was my favorite movie. And I just wanted to be like Mike. And one thing that I drew from Mike as I got older and I started to, take an interest in his career was this idea that you can put it on me and I'm going to make sure that we're successful. And that's something that a father usually shows you, is that, I'm going to make sure that my family's okay. I'm going to make sure that we have a place to stay and food to eat and clothes to wear. And so, I draw that skill set from Mike, which was, I want to be somebody who can be relied on. And I want to, come through when, I am relied on. And so that was a skill set that I drew from Mike. And then last but definitely not least was LeBron James. And LeBron was somebody that I actually got to watch his entire career. I got to see him on ESPN playing high school basketball. And I always liked LeBron because he was good at everything. And that was something that I want for my personal basketball game. But it's also a skill set that I wanted to take into my life of, being somebody who's well-rounded, who can do a little bit of everything. I don't want to be somebody who's, I'm only good at this. I want to draw skill sets and be, capable of doing multiple things, not just on the floor, but off the floor. And another characteristic that I really loved about him, which was a little opposite of Michael, was his empowerment of people around him, his willingness to, even though he was the star, he was willing to empower other people around him on the floor and off the floor. And that was a skill set that I wanted to draw as well, which was to be the kind of man who could, be relied on like Michael, but also empower other people in their skill sets and let them know that they're valuable as well. And, nothing is greater than the team. And so that was a skill set that I drew from him. And so, taking the passion from Kevin Garnett and taking the fuck it attitude from Allen Iverson and seeing people that look like you or, come from a background like you where you can say, hey, I identify myself with that person, like Derek Jeter. And then Ken Griffey, following in the footsteps of his father. And then Deion, having this confidence about himself and then being relied on like Michael and then being empowering like LeBron. I wanted to take all of these skill sets from the idols that I couldn't touch, who, couldn't break my heart unless they, missed the game winner type of thing, where I didn't have to worry about them being so close to me and really hurting me. And then at the same time, taking the skill sets from my uncle, which is, I want to be like him. I want to be cool and I want to be well liked and I want to have nice things. Taking all of these skill sets and drawing them in, and this is what I mean by having these surrogate fathers. And so then that leads me into my relationship with my grandpa. My grandpa was not my mother's biological father, but he treated me as if I was his biological grandson. And I really didn't know that he wasn't my biological grandfather until I had got into like high school. It's crazy. But he was the first person where it wasn't like my uncle where I idolized him. And it wasn't like these athletes where I said, okay, here's what I can draw the skill sets from them. He was the first man that like I could say, here's what a man is and here's what a man looks like. And I can go to him and know that he'll be reliable, know that he'll always be there for me. And he was the first man that like showed me what an actual man looks like, having a wife, having a job, being consistent at his job and staying at his job for a long time. He taught me a, a vast amount of skill sets that a lot of young men don't get taught. And I think that it's paramount that you find somebody like this that's older than you, that comes from a generation or two before you, that you can draw skill sets from them. And, the skill sets that he implanted in me, I still use to this day. He would make me get up early. He would make me make my bed. He would have a whiteboard of things to accomplish for that day that he wanted done. Like if he went to work that day and I was staying and I didn't have to go to school that day, he would have on his thing like, okay, here's what you're going to accomplish for today. And once you have marked off everything that you've accomplished, then you'll have the free time to go play your games, or because my grandpa was really cool. Like he was an older guy who played video games, who was, he played tennis. He did a lot of things that most grandpas don't do, mainly because he was a lot younger, because my mother had me so young. But at the same time, it's just his character. He's just that kind of guy. And so he also empowered me, though, in the midst of like giving me these, these strong parameters and being hard on me, and, sometimes being able to make me cry by just talking to me and being the guy who would reprimand me. He gave me a lot of freedom as well. He would have me say, hey, as long as you accomplish these things before I get home, you can do whatever you want to do. And you can either get up and, spend your time by playing games and try to knock it all out at the end of the day, or you can get up early, knock it all out, and then have the rest of the day to yourself. And so I ended up choosing the latter because of the things that he taught me, which was, you get up, you accomplish what you need to accomplish, and then you have the rest of the day to do whatever you want. And then I ended up taking that into school, which is, instead of coming home and playing video games or going outside, I'd come home, knock out my homework, and then I would go, and now I got the rest of the day to do whatever I wanted. And this was a skill set that I learned from my grandfather. On top of that, teaching me how to work in the yard, how to maintain plants and keep your yard looking nice. On top of that, keeping your house clean, keeping your room clean, teaching me how to work on a car, change brakes, change spark plugs, change my oil. These were skill sets that, your father would normally teach you being there on a daily basis. And I wasn't able to spend every day with him, but if I had a weekend where, I didn't have to leave for sports, I was at my grandpa's house learning and hanging out with him. And he was one of like, the first like best friends that I had, him and my grandma. And so, I learned a lot from him. And these are the kind of men that you want to have around that can teach you these skill sets. But the way that you understand that they have these skill sets is their life will show that they have these skill sets. You'll see the way that they conduct their life, and that'll let you know that they have these skill sets. And so it was something that, I was blessed to be able to have growing up in an unfortunate situation. And so I spent as much time with him as I possibly could. And like even to the point of living with him and things like that. But I'll get into those a little later. But I just kind of wanted to touch on finding somebody from generation or two before you that you can latch on to and spend as much time with as possible. And you also don't have to worry about them, hurting you. And so that was my grandpa. And that led into some other relationships that I've had, which was my first ever basketball coach. He was like one of the first men who kind of taught me, like skill sets and, taking your skill set like seriously. But before that, he kind of, was somebody who offered endearment and love towards me. even though I wasn't his child and he knew me from nothing, he just saw that I was pretty good at basketball. And me and his son went to school together. And one time he came up to me at the Boys and Girls Club and he basically was telling me I should join the Boys and Girls Club basketball league. And I was telling him, like, I don't even know how I would afford it. Like, knowing my home life, like, I'm sure my mom won't be able to afford it. And so he ended up putting up the money for me to join the Boys and Girls Club league. And that was like the first step into me, going into a path that I chose, which was sports. And this is something that I'll get into later. But I just wanted to touch on him taking that step for me, and you're going to find some people along these lines that are willing to. And if not, you need to put yourself in situations where people can see that this is somebody who needs guidance. So he did that for me, and that led me into this other man. His name was well, I don't want to give away his name, but he was like the leader of this travel ball team that my first coach ended up getting me into after Boys and Girls Club. And this guy was like super cool to me. It was dope to me that he was able to take us on these trips almost every weekend to different cities to play basketball. And we stayed in hotels and we, did cool things. We went to like Raging Waters and Six Flags and sporting events. And it was so cool to me how he was able to kind of be like, I could tell he was the guy that kind of ran things. And it was like a police activity league. And he was a policeman, but they kind of like, ran this for us. And I just thought that he was super cool to be able to be in that position to do that for young men like myself and all the other young men and women that he did it for. And, taking us to In-N-Out, like that was one of my favorite memories too, is we would always go to In-N-Out. But this was a guy that I could look up to who kind of reminded me of my uncle. He wasn't as young as my uncle and as cool as my uncle, but he was an older version. And I was thinking to myself, when I get to that age, that's what I want to look like. And it goes back to what I was trying to say in the beginning, finding people that you can say to yourself, here's what I want to look like at this point in my life. And then here's what I want to look like at a later part of my life. And so, this guy was somebody that I said, okay, this is what I want to look like at a later period in my life. I want to be able to give back to the youth. And that leads me into my middle school teacher. And he was like my middle school basketball coach for like the school, but he was also like a mentor in a way. And, he was the first person that I had met that wasn't somebody who just went to work. He wasn't somebody that I don't know what they do for work. And, he was my teacher, so I knew what he did, but he would always, make it be known to us, how non-important his job was and how he did his job out of love because he had other ventures in his life. And he would tell us how, he was in the process of purchasing a laundromat and he had, some other businesses going on. And so he was the first man that like showed me, wait a minute, I don't have to be one dimensional. I don't have to just do one thing and put all my focus into that. And then that'll be the only thing I do in my life. And then when I'm done with that, I don't know what to do with myself. He showed me that, hey, you can have something that you're passionate about. And then along the way, you can have other ventures and skill sets that you can learn that can offer service to people. And he was the first person that I saw that was like, oh, wait a minute, he has other ventures. And on top of that, being a Black man doing these things, I just thought that, I thought the world of him and I really liked him a lot. And then that leads me into high school, where my first ever high school basketball coach, he was the first, like, not the first, but like at this point in my life in the age group that I was in, it was the first time that I had somebody who believed in me the same way that I believed in myself, if not more. He made me like he validated my feelings of myself, thinking like I'm a great basketball player and I'm gonna be a great basketball player. And he would validate that. He would tell other people how great I was, and I would hear from other people him telling them how great he thought I was gonna be. And he always was like somebody who made me feel like, I was capable. And so, he was the first man in my life, not like in my life, but like at that point when you're coming into, high school and your early teen years, he was the first man that kind of made me feel that way. Everybody else kind of gave me love and, they kind of, would push me here and there, but he was the first person that validated my self-worth. And so, I really appreciated him for that. And it kind of led me into one of his personal surrogate fathers, which he kind of showed me, what it means to put in the work in the gym. And, for the longest time, I was just somebody who thought I'm just going to be really skillful and I'm going to be good and I'm just going to be great. He showed me what it means to actually work on your craft and go to the gym and, watch what you eat and different things like that. And so he showed me what it takes to put in the time off the court so you can be good on the court. And he was an older guy who was built and strong. And I was like, okay, cool. This is somebody I can learn from. When I get up and get ready to go to school, he's in his garage lifting weights. So it was somebody that I was able to draw that skill set from. And another man that I drew some skills from, it was a friend of mine. It was his older brother. And this guy would always like cut everybody's hair. And he had a really cool Lexus and it had the beat in the back with some rims. He had the blacked out windows. And I was like, yeah, that car's fresh. But he was really good with women. And kind of like my uncle, even though my uncle was always there, was just kind of in and out. But, he was a guy when my uncle couldn't be around. He was another guy that I would go to for information. Like my uncle was the guy that I would ride around with and like, like I would say we freestyle and talk about ladies and, I could talk about different cool things and he could give me a perspective on it. And this guy gave me a different perspective on women and how to be a little more seductive with women. And so anytime he would give me a lineup, because everybody else was getting haircuts, but I had long hair. So I would just get a lineup or like a taper and I would just, listen to him talk about his stories with women and how he was able to capture the heart of that woman. And so I took a lot of the skills that I learned from just asking him, hey, so what about this girl? And then he'd tell me how he met her. And so I learned how to, get skills about women from, my uncle and him. And, these are other skill sets that you got to be able to learn. You got to find men that you can say, oh, well, he gets women. How does he do it? And then you go and you start an apprenticeship basically. And so, that's what I did with him. And, but then that kind of leads me into somebody that was very important and, almost, if not more important than my grandfather. This guy was one of my first basketball coaches as well. And he was one of the first people in my youth that like showed me care that wasn't somebody that was in my family. Meaning, kind of like my other first basketball coach, he took like a liking to me and he kind of took me under his wing and he was hard on me on the court. And he would always push me, and tell me little things like point guards don't lead from the back type of thing. And he would always kind of just push me to be even better than, what I thought I was or what I was. But the story that I'll tell is, that means a lot to me is we had like this tournament and we were in Oakland and we were in the championship game. And I was having a terrible game. I was extremely nervous and we were playing against a really good team. And I just really I couldn't find my feeding. I don't know what it was, but I was just extremely nervous and I wasn't having a good game. So I got taken out and I didn't play for a while. And then halftime came and I had not been playing. And then the next half started and I still wasn't playing. And so he left. Like, he was normally our coach, but he wasn't our coach at that time. And he left the stands, came over to talk to our coach, and basically told him, and I'm like watching him tell the coach, put me in the game. And that was, whether he knew it or not, that was a major point in my life where somebody stuck their neck out for me. Somebody was willing to put themselves on the line for me. And, previously I had never had somebody do that. I mean, my first coach bringing me to the travel ball, he kind of stuck his neck out. But this was the first person in my life who went to combat for me, besides my uncle. But this was somebody who wasn't related to me, had no ties to me, and was willing to do that for me. And I ended up going in and, helping us win the game, and, was kind of like a catalyst. And my game, I was able to be myself after that. And it was just amazing, that point. And so I bring that up to say that, be aware of the people that are going to be willing to fight for you and go to bat for you. And when you grow up in a single parent home, it's not going to be very many people. And, a lot of people will probably take a liking to you, but not very many people are going to be willing to stick their neck out for you. And, when they do, those are the people you want to gravitate towards. Those are the people that, if I believe in a higher power, that are put in your life for a reason. And until this day, that coach I look at him like my father. I look at him as though he is my father, because he's been in my life since a young age, and he's always been that guy who was willing to, fight for me and go to war for me. And so I gravitated towards him after those moments. I mean, I always loved him and liked him, but after that, there was nothing he was going to be able to do to get rid of me. And so, you want to make sure that those people that you find in your life, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a manager at your job, but these people that are willing to fight for you and put their neck out for you, one, you want to make sure that you make them look good for doing that. But two, you want to make sure that you kind of start gravitating towards those people and spend as much time with those people as possible, because those are the people who are going to truly love you. And when you don't have a father, you're looking for that kind of love. It's a love that your mother won't be able to give you. It's going to come with reprimanding. It's going to come with standards. But it's also going to come with compassion. And so you want to be able to find, these type of men that you can, gravitate towards, idolize, and want to be like. And so, when you set these things up for yourself and you find these men, this is how you lead into being able to mature properly as a young man going into your teen years and then off into manhood. And so finding surrogate fathers for your mother is paramount, and it's going to be on you. Your mother will maybe try, but she's going to have a lot of things on her plate. And so it's going to be up to you to find these men that can fill that void for you. And it's, it's paramount that you choose the right man, because depending on the type of men that you choose to be like can send you down one path or the other. I could have tried to be like certain other people, and I would have took a thug gangster, I want to be this or that route. Or, you find these other men who show you that there's other routes where you can, get it in a more, wholesome way. But I was able to combine all of these types of men, and put them into one and say, I want to combine all of these characters, all of these men, and put them into me, so that when I get to this point, I'm this kind of man. And when I get to a later point in my life, I'll be this kind of man. And so you want to set these things up for yourself. And then that'll lead you, into what'll be next, which is you're going to have to get off the titty. You're going to have to get off of your mom's bosom and being around her and always wanting to please her, and I'm going to get in more into that into the next one, but you want to make sure that, like, after you've found these surrogate fathers, you're going to have to start slowly moving away from being around your mom all the time. And that's going to lead you into some other things like spirituality and some other growths that need to occur. But I'm going to get into that into the next one, because we're coming up on almost 50 minutes here. So, the main thing that I want you to take away from this is finding surrogate fathers, finding men that you can draw skill sets from, be it close, because you want to have men that are there that you can go spend time with, but also men that are far away that you can look up to, and, you can draw skill sets from them as well. And so, take an interest in their life and watch the interest be taken back into your life. So, and, the reason why I'm doing this, and this is very important to me, because I wish that somebody was able to give me this information when I was young. I was just doing it blindly. I was just doing it out of, this was just my life story and the way that my life was supposed to go. But if I had people there who told me and was like, here's what you need to do to be able to become the man that within yourself, you want to become. Because in your youth, you're going to start feeling like, man, I want to be a man. And if you don't, you should be feeling like, I want to be a man and I want to be a great man. And my mother is not going to be able to teach me how to do that. She can give me a lot of benefits and a lot of skill sets that men can't give me, but I'm not going to know what it's like to be a man, and she can't teach me what it's like to be a man because she's not a man. And so you're going to have to find the men that you can do that for, with, because, your mom, it's just you and your mom. So, I wish somebody was there to give me this information, and that's what I'm going to do throughout this series, is give you the keys to unlocking your development into manhood and becoming a great man, because we need more great men in the world. I think that there's a lack of them. And if they are there, they live in the shadows, and we don't need that. To come to a conclusion though, I do want to talk about one thing, just so we can really hammer it in how important it is. So here it's saying fatherless children in the US is up to 85%. So 85% of youth in prison come from fatherless homes. So if you go to a jail, more than likely the people that are there, especially in juvenile homes, they come from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. And not saying that you can't make something of yourself dropping out of high school, but usually finishing high school, going on to college, these things are factors into, having a successful life. And not only having a successful life, but being a successful man, father, husband, or whatever it is that you want to be in with your life. But you have to see that for your own life. But I wanted to show that stat because, like the last one I showed, single motherhood is only going up. Men and women are not really on the same page right now. And maybe that's partly planned and maybe it's not. But we're not getting any better. And mainly, it's due to a lack of good women and also a lack of good men. And I would say mainly due to a lack of good men. And so, you finding these surrogate fathers for yourself will, transition you to not being somebody that's in prison or who doesn't finish school and things of that nature. Having a father usually leads to success in life. And if it wasn't for the surrogate fathers that I had, I wouldn't be where I'm at in life. And I could probably be one of those people that are in prison or dead or on drugs. I finished school honor roll. I played sports and was really good at both football and basketball. And so the reason why I was able to have resilience in my life, even though my circumstances wasn't that great, was because of these surrogate fathers. So take that from this, and I hope you continue to tune in, and I hope you can, you learn something from this, and take these notes and look for those men that you can have in your life, and maybe I might be one of those men. Who knows, but thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Stay stupid, and Boss Man out.